Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 577 of Constructive Criticism. I am joined by my co-hosts, Abe Stein.
That's me.
And the Mason Clark.
What up, everybody?
What's up, guys? I love it when we all get to be on the show together, and I think this is going to be a good one. Today we're talking about both the results of RC Houston, our thoughts on Modern, and kind of the Modern format overall. I'm really excited about this. Should we just dive in with like the top performing decks, Abe?
Yeah, sounds good.
So, if we kind of go down, I did do power rankings for this, but we're not going to use power rankings as much this week. I just did it so we had the info. I want to start this episode talking about Esper Gorios. In the power rankings, got 5 points with 3 finishes. For those who don't know how this works, our updated rankings give you 3 for a top 8, 2 for a top 32, and 1 for a top 64. And Esper Gorios was the most played deck at the Pro Tour and kind of plummeted here. Mason, what do you think of that?
I think it makes a bit of sense. So part of the reason to play Esper Gorios is you think it has a pretty good matchup against Belcher, right? And if you think a lot of pro teams thought Belcher was going to be one of the most played decks, if not the most played deck. So playing a deck that beats up on it makes a lot of sense, right? Especially if maybe you don't feel particularly comfortable battling through the hate with Belcher. That makes some amount of sense. The other thing I think is Gorios is a pretty hard deck. We talked about on the podcast episode last week how Javier switched off. We heard from the grapevine that like Javier switched off of Gorios because it was too hard to play. And this is something that I know some of my clients definitely had some crises about when it comes to coaching. I had a couple almost switch off it and a couple that actually did, just because like playing the deck was so hard. And one of the things that I personally noticed a lot from coaching is how many insane decision points there are with this deck and just how easy it is to like make a small slip up and do something that's good, but miss out on a great line. And I think that has really like compounded with some people feeling like, you know what, I can't do this to the level I want. And when we're in a healthy format, we're seeing people move to other decks as well. So I think there's a lot of compounding factors. I think lots of people realize like maybe I can't play this deck to the level I want to play it at.
Yeah, this one surprised me maybe not the most. This one surprised me. And the reason for me is like, I said in our Discord that I thought that Jeskai Blink would be both one of the most played decks and also one of the best decks. And I would have to look at the win percentage, but I would assume Gorios is very favored in that matchup. And thus I thought that people would just end up there, but it actually didn't look like it was as played as I thought it would be. Probably for the reasons that you said, Mason.
I'm just pulling up the data. It looks like, according to MTG Decks, in the Esper Gorios, it's about a split actually between Jeskai and.
That surprises me. Does it surprise you, Abe?
I think it's not as surprising to me as maybe it is to you. I think that the Jeskai deck really does have a very solid game plan. It's been more consistent. And I think that a lot of the times the Esper deck, in order to have the powerful starts that it does, can exchange some amount of consistency there. And when you start to factor in that kind of dynamic and they play on some of the same axes, I think it can lean towards being more even than maybe it seems on the surface.
That was the first deck that like I wanted to talk about because it wasn't in our kind of like our show notes for decks to discuss. I do want to kind of talk about like the results for just a second, and I'm just going to give the top 8 decks, and I'm going to do it 1 to 8 just because it's easier for me to read. We have Amulet Titan with 15 points, 11 total finishes. Jeskai Blink 13 points, 7 total finishes. Boros Energy got 12 points with 6 finishes. Izzet Affinity got 10 points with 6 finishes. Izzet Prowess got 10 points with 4 finishes. Blue Eye Control got 6 points with 4 finishes. And then we get to Goryo's and then Esper Blink with 4 points for 3 finishes, being the tiebreaker. Are there any of these that surprise you before we go to decks to discuss? Or should we jump into decks to discuss between these, Mason?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I want to really call out is Pro Tours, the incentives to play the best deck are very high, right? And the RC incentive is high, but not that same level, I think, for a lot of people. And a lot of people are anxious to sometimes pull the trigger. And I think this is part of why you see decks like Energy do quite well. Like, I think Energy, you know, like it has been overplayed a lot. It is a good deck, don't get me wrong. But it is one of those decks that it has like bad matchups that like it can't solve some matchups, right? Like there are decks that it has issues with. And at this event, we're seeing just a way more diverse metagame, right? Like decks like Broodskill, for example, had one person play them at the Pro Tour, right? And we see a lot more of them here. And part of that has to do with size as well. But I just wanted to kind of highlight that like things are different. And this is why it's important sometimes to pay attention to the type of tournaments that are being played, right? And it's like, yeah, you know, going into the PT, if you think Belcher's the best deck, then like playing Energy also seems like a kind of a silly thing to do. And so lots of, you know, cascading type stuff in that regard.
I have 2 thoughts on what you just said. I think that there was like a dichotomy at this tournament for what it's worth. Because I think you're right about Energy. I think that like people owned it, they knew how to play it, and they played it, right? Which is like one of the things that we talked about in the CCMG Patreon testing team was like, this aligns a lot closer to your RCQs than it does to the Pro Tour. But also the most played deck was the best deck. Right? So like Titan was still the most played deck.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, when I read into kind of the, not even talking about results, but just looking at like the metagame, I think it really shows that between RC season, a lot of people I know were waiting for Pro Tour results, but I think it was a pretty poorly kept secret that Amulet Titan was a good deck to be putting your time into and was a front runner for one of, if not the best deck in Modern to play. And I think that looking at the results, I mean, you don't see it super represented in the top 32. It definitely earned, like as the most played deck, it earned a fair share of PT invites and you know, a player in the top 8, but it wasn't so dominant that you're like, it wasn't like Breach where it was like, oh, this is, you know, just about everyone qualifying and a certain chunk is just all playing Breach. But when you look towards like the top 64, that's where really a ton of familiar names, players who are already Pro Tour qualified, perhaps are even playing Worlds, and players who have a pedigree of playing Amulet, just in droves, filling out that like, you know, 40th to 64th range, all with really, really solid finishes. And I think that when you look at it's funny when you say it out loud of like, it kind of tracks more to the RCQ metagame. Well, it kind of makes sense that it would, right? That the RC, which is full of RCQ winners, tracks towards the metagames you might expect at those RCs. But compared to the Pro Tour, there's also like a little bit less certainty, right? The Pro Tour was a modern format that was pretty decently explored a few months out. And, you know, this tournament is kind of responding to the information that we gained. And so when you look at what that means in terms of what a large number of players are doing with that information compared to just an elite few of the qualified players for the Pro Tour, like you have more people who are playing Amulet Titan now than they were before because they were like, this is how I'm going to do well at the RC. This is my best shot. You have more players who are picking up new things or putting down old things to to kind of keep up and try to get ahead. And I think it really developed just a very different metagame that, I mean, I know I for one was very surprised that Boros had as many people like with good finishes as it did. I mean, that was a deck that I was kind of counting out because I think the dynamics of the format had changed away from where it was good. But I think it goes to show kind of the health of Modern, that a deck like Boros, when it's not being optimized for, still, it still swings. It still has what it takes to put up numbers.
Yeah, one of the things that I talked about with that in like the kind of a meeting I had yesterday is like it is Jund, it is Murktide, like that's the deck. Its horse matchup can't be that bad because it has turn whatever wins, like it presents a clock and pressure. Mason, you made a really good point 2 episodes ago about Amulet Titan. Like your worst matchup can't be that bad if you have a turn 2 win. The consistency of Boros is like, hey, like if I just outplay my opponent and I believe in myself, I believe in the heart of the cards, like I can do anything type of thing. And I don't know that like any of us are gonna recommend Boros for Vegas, but it is interesting.
Yeah, its biggest strength is biggest weakness, right? Like it does the thing, right? And that's like why it loses to strategies and not 2 cards, right? It's like has a very high floor with a slightly higher ceiling, right? So there's definitely skill expression, don't get me wrong. And your deck kind of does this thing. And you can do it, and you can, tweak a little bit with your sideboard cards, but you're not breaking the mold in that regard. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's just a thing you have to understand when you click the energy button is like, I think the decks that I am weak to are going to be lower this weekend. And that was the thing. A lot of people felt like Belcher was going to maybe be less played and less represented going into this weekend because people are really worried about it fighting the hate at the RC after a Pro Tour win as a deck that, can be hard targeted a little bit. And the real question is can Belcher adapt to that?
What do you think the answer is to that?
I think jury's out a little bit. I mean, like it didn't do particularly great, but I also think a lot of people locked in their lists ahead of time, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I think Belcher is still a totally solid deck or whatever. But it definitely like people came in droves and they came prepared to beat it, and we even saw some decks that like did particularly well this weekend. That are decks that like you would choose because of decks like Belcher, with like the Simic Birthing Ritual deck doing pretty well. That was a deck that like I think, it popped up on Magic Online as a way to fight all of the combo-y decks, right? And so that deck doing well, I think, is like a response to like, a lot of people did bring Belcher and they weren't fully prepared for these sort of things. And so I'm kind of curious how much can they adapt? They are a monocolored deck that has a lot of fixed slots. So, one of the things we talk about energy is it's consistent, it does its thing. Same about Belcher. It kind of does its thing. It has some amount of flexibility, but, not infinitely more than energy does. So I'm interested to see how it comes to the weeks.
I always think about kind of Belcher and energy as a yin and yang. Mm-hmm. Like if Boros is the most efficient possible fair deck that you can play, like, Belcher is the most consistent and, just the most efficient unfair deck you can play. It does its thing. It's ruthlessly efficient at that. There's not a ton of room, right? You beat it with strategies and not necessarily with cards. You bring decks that are ready to pass the Belcher test. And when you look at it that way, like it makes sense to me why Belcher being on the down gives the opportunity, because people are choosing to suppress it, gives the opportunity for Boros to be on the rise. And I think another piece of it is that, with Amulet being, the best form deck at the PT, and there being kind of this knowledge of, I need to play something that's prepared for it, looking at, a lot of the numbers on Solitudes and decks playing like enough answers to what Amulet is doing and making sure to be able to beat that. Like the more you do things like that, the more that you are susceptible to just efficient threats, right? Like Solitude is not the best answer for Ocelot Pride. It's not the cards you want there. Like even like, Solitude Ephemerate is not necessarily the cards you want against, Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride, Galvanic Discharge, and like Ajani. Like these are not efficient exchanges, and I just think that
it's almost why Boros came into existence, right? Like it was exactly that.
Yeah, and I think that where we're at in the format right now, kind of shows that these are the tension points. You can play the right answers, but you're leaving yourself open to other angles of attack, and ones that have traditionally been the ones people have been trying to keep down. I think it's a very interesting time for the modern format to see kind of where it all fits in. And I think that I still think, and I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I still think that Amulet Titan is the Apex Predator probably best deck. It came in, I think, with a bit of a knowledge target on its back, and people know that they need to be prepared for the Amulet matchup. But it still put up, the largest number of top 64 finishes and had the most points in those.
I agree, and I think there's like a couple things. Like, 2 episodes ago, you guys talked about Tron, for example, the kind of the colorless. I don't want to say like Eldrazi Tron, but like it really is like E-Tron 3.0. That deck's really good. Like it's so good against so many things. But when like Amulet Titan is the best and most played deck, like you can't play it. Like it went 0-13 in the Pro Tour, and I think that when I was looking earlier, it had a 32% win percentage of the RC with like a ton of matches. Like you can't play this deck that if Amulet Titan didn't exist would be like the de facto good big mana deck. And that speaks to the power of Amulet Titan in a lot of ways. Like Amulet Titan doesn't have, to Mason's point, like, there are some matchups that are bad. Like if they have all in combo. One of the things that we talked about that did not happen on screen, which was funny, was I was like, Mill seems really good against Amulet Titan. We actually saw Amulet Titan, I believe, beat Mill on camera. But it was interesting, and Ruby Storm, for example, a deck that I wouldn't recommend. Just basic, like, all-in combo decks, really good against Amulet Titan. They're not going to interact with you. But the rest of the format, it's tough, man. Like, I think, Mason, was it you that said that there weren't cards that beat Amulet Titan 2 episodes ago?
No, I was talking about that was like, I think, in response to Energy. I was talking in our Patreon Discord about how I think people play the wrong cards to beat Amulet a lot. Like, I think that they think they're C plus answer to Amulet. So maybe another way to describe it is like a speed bump is like a hard answer, right? So like, playing a White Orchid Phantom is not like, gotcha. It's not like Blood Moon was back in the day. I haven't owned you, Even flickering it sometimes isn't enough with like double Amulet type draws or some of their better things. You need specific, strong hate cards if you're going to fight through Amulet. And Amulet can beat basically all of them if given enough time. So you need to have a strong thing to slow it down and a fast clock to close the door. It's kind of how I've described Amulet. Or you need to like hard lock them out, like blue-white control, Days Undoing. I'm chanting you locked up, while I'm hitting you the whole time. Like you need to do something that like actually stops them, and that is like a pretty tall task to do. Or kill them really quickly, like you said, like beat Storm or whatever.
Yeah. If there's no disruption, like Storm's pretty good, but. Mm-hmm. I want to move on from Titan, but before we do, I want to go back to something that you said, Abe, about consistency index. Because one of the decks that actually did surprisingly well for how much it was played was, Neoform. I think this deck is really bad, really inconsistent, and you shouldn't play it. But I've already had people talk about, like, it has a good Titan matchup. it has like all these like really good matchups. I want to play it. I think the deck loses to itself too much, and I want to, before we move on to like the other decks, I just wanted your guys' opinion about this. I'm not a combo player. I'm probably biased. I wanted your guys' thoughts.
I think that the deck actually suffers from more of a Goryo's problem than like a Ruby Storm problem, if we're going to define it that way. Like, I think it actually is a deck that is not so... It's not nearly as on as it used to be. I think that the way it's built now allows it a bit more freedom to and a bit more resilience. It's definitely among the faster decks, but it did seem like it was a good metagame for it. I mean, that's something that Goldacott, Daniel Goetschel, was on Twitter saying, is like, when the metagame was posted, he was like, and yet again another good metagame for Neoform. But he also, after the Pro Tour, said he felt like he maybe didn't even play Neoform as well as he could have, and that was much to his detriment, because in order to be that much more consistent, it's not a lights out win. I think that if you're someone who really likes decks like Neoform and has experience playing decks like Neoform, this kind of metagame was a solid one for it. The combo decks had been like, the combo decks been hated out a bit, especially the ones that can interact with you, right? Belcher is on the down, and then the other decks you need to work through are not playing the right kind of things to really interact with you, because they're kind of getting into their own kind of Quantum Riddler, Atraxa arms race for card advantage, and aren't playing a ton of really hateful permission or anything like that. I think that while I don't know that Neoform is a best deck in Modern, or like even a top 5 or top 10 that I would like personally want to play, I think that it still occupies a position of being like a good one to take advantage of certain speeds of metagames, and the deck is much better than I think it was even like 2 years ago.
I like that. I think you convinced me too. Like I think that I'm so biased that I was hoping somebody would sell me, and I think you did it. Mason, you had something to say though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the deck is pretty consistent. You just have to mulligan, right? Like, the deck will do its thing. I wouldn't say it's inconsistent. I would say it's like, it is all in. I do my thing. I have some amount of resiliency, but like, once again, my deck is kind of doing a thing, and you get to play a bunch of cards in your main deck that are really strong. Like, I think Consign to Memory, for example, is like a really powerful Magic card. You get to main deck that it works with your combo, right? Like, I think that's like a very appealing part of this deck. So I think this deck is good, but it is a deck that is like, it is preying on things, like, this is a deck that like does struggle against, Psychic Frog Force Negation decks, right? Like, clock plus stack-based interaction can be tough. I'm looking at a tournament from what I can tell is an MIT tournament, literally that school, and like, this person got 5th playing this, and they're really good at math, so I have to trust, But no, jokes aside, I think there is something to this deck. I do think it is underexplored and underappreciated by players. I think there probably is something to this deck. We'll probably learn a lot more with it as time goes on. We'll get one card printed and we'll realize maybe we should have been playing this for a lot longer than we have been. Let's
talk about Blank. I'm going to take a firm stance before you guys talk. I don't like the Esper builds. I think Thoughtseize Bones is worse than Ragavan in this format. And I want to be on the Jeskai side where like my overall stuff is pressuring you rather than disrupting you. I think that it is if you were in the Patreon Discord, you know that I was really high on this deck going into this RC, and my opinion has not changed. I actually think that everybody's going to come to the same conclusion though, so I'm actually kind of worried for this deck in Vegas. I think that like, so many people are going to want to play it. The mirror is going to be really important. And the people are going to try to figure out how to beat it. that it is not as important as it was going to this event. But I was pretty in on Jeskai Blink going into this event.
What about it is appealing? You're saying you liked it, but
yeah, this was actually asked me last night. I think that like the fact that you get to be like have your Ragavan turns, Consign. You actually mentioned it just barely. Like the fact that Consign is so good in your main deck for what you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it. Also, I'm a Thalia gamer here, by the way. I know that there are some lists that don't play that. I think that like all of that really comes together for a cohesive, like, you know, scam game plan plus the best interaction that you can play right now. And also like it might be the best Fable deck I've seen in a long time. Which I have been a like anti-Fable gamer for like, I don't know, a couple of months, so.
Okay, so sorry, maybe I asked that question poorly. What in the metagame makes you want to play this deck? Is it like, so it sounded a bit like Consigned, like main deck was a big draw.
Yeah, Consigned main deck is a big draw. I think Ragavan's actually like hit an all-time high. I think Abe has felt this way about like Zoo, for example, where like Zoo overperformed Ragavan's like really good right now specifically, and Jeskai gets to play Ragavan over the other things. I think that the other thing is like it gets to be a Solitude deck, which is like really important right now too. So like it kind of checks a lot of boxes.
Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm kind of hearing is like you believe in the Quantum Riddler Solitude Shell as like a thing that is powerful.
Yeah.
And you think the best way to complement that is with a proactive game plan.
Yeah.
And then combine that with like Obsidian Charm on the sideboard. It's one of the best ways to beat the Eldrazi decks that the Esper decks.
I'm not really convinced that Charma is better than White Phantom Orchid, but yeah.
Sure. Okay. So it really is though just like plays Ragavan, some extent Fable, thumbs up emoji.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think it's one of those things where it's like, in theory, you should be. This is hard to do in practice because they're so different when it comes to the number of cards. But in theory, if you're going to be like a Blink gamer, you should just kind of be adapting to what's going on. If you think things are more combo related, I really like the Espery builds personally. And if you think things are more fair related, I really like the Jeskai builds. And I think it makes sense that if you think a lot of people are going to be interacting and playing like the Esper type ones and other fair decks, then Jeskai is good. And it's not like Jeskai is a dog to the combo decks, right? In the same way, it's not like Esper's a dog to the fair decks. So, you know, you do all that with a powerful proactive start. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's also, I mean, just talking about where we started with the Esper versus Jeskai, I think that with the speed of the format ticking up a notch, you get really rewarded, and also I think with just Quantum Riddler in general, like you get rewarded for playing cheaper, consistently good cards. And that's where I do think that the threats like Ragavan are a little bit better than, you know, maybe Emperor of Bones, Overlord of the Baelmerk. Like your value engine is just stronger as being Quantum Riddlers and Phlages, and more consistently valuable being those cards than being like Overlords and like you're just a better deck for those things. And I mean it makes sense, right? Like we said, like I said about Boros, like the removal is not going to line up in a way that's going to punish those as often as it did maybe even 3 weeks ago.
You did just remind me that last night I did say Phlage Arena of Glory gets to be played in one of these decks and not in the other. Thanks, Mason.
No problem. I think one of the interesting things here is that like everyone's like on one Emperor Bones, which is like this weird change in the last. Like I didn't realize that some of those I'm looking through them. The card I was going to say that I was surprised people weren't playing was Bowmaster. Like I get Emperor Bones is cute with your Black Overlord and like it's cute against Gorios, But man, Bowmaster just has seemed like a card I really want to play in this kind of deck. And maybe I'm just like cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs for that. But
No, I think
looking
that's
through
fair.
this,
I think
Yeah.
there needs to be some kind of split, and also like one Emperor Bones doesn't seem like enough. If you're gonna like play black, it has to be for something, right? Like Thoughtseizes can't be enough.
I think it's the Overlord of the Baelmerk. That's what I think they're in on. They're like overlording Feliaing.
Sure.
If that makes sense. And then like they're
You're
using
looking at
Overlord to
the-
buy back subtlety.
Looking at the like 20th place list, they're kind of more traditional. They're playing 3 Emperors and Flicker Wisps and some main deck White Ochre Phantoms.
Mm-hmm.
I think as much as there is a lot of opportunity to gain value off of your opponent drawing cards and punish them for it in the format, like you were saying, Mason, like that makes Bowmasters attractive.
Yeah.
I think one of the most attractive aspects about Bowmasters was that it was often converting for a card's worth of value on top of that, right? Like it was either punishing, I mean, its peak was punishing like 1 Rings and Beanstalks,
Yeah.
which is very different than punishing like a Quantum Riddler, and there's nothing really to kill effectively like outside. There's not like incidental or like
We
punishing
just
value.
talked about
It's-
Ragavan for like 2 minutes, man.
Well, yeah, but your deck already plays a lot of ways to make Ragavan not good. Like you don't need to be playing or want necessarily even to be playing like a pile of Bowmasters, especially when a lot of the decks that you actually like care about that are not the fair games that you're currently positioned to kind of trump, right? You have Overlords, you have Flicker Wisp, you have like a ton of value generating creatures, and that's like your whole game plan. You don't really need to be gaining a card or two to or negating half a card or gaining your own half card of your opponent's excess card draw. And in the combo matchups where you really do want more, you don't really have it as much. I mean, the fact of the matter is we're playing the Esper Blink deck most often so we can have Consign, and Consign is in a place in the format where main decking it is completely acceptable. So, if you want to be good in those ways, your mana doesn't even really work to be
Okay.
black, white, blue.
I think I figured this out. I've looked through a bunch of these lists. There's just so many different builds of this deck that I think we're almost talking past each other. Because I was like, what are you talking about with some of those cards? Because I'm looking at lists and I'm like seeing a bunch of like force negations and subtleties. And we're talking about bones and we're talking about Flicker Wisp. I think the thing that maybe is jumping out to me from this conversation is that the Esper Blink archetype can go like 4 different directions. You know what I mean? It's looking like you can be a subtlety or a solitude or an emperor or a Flicker Wisp or a force negation deck. You can be more blue, less blue, more black, so I'm saying this as a like, maybe for the listeners, we're having a similar thing of like, this archetype seems to be very, very wide. And I'm curious to see what happens over the coming weeks as players converge inwards. Like I had saw Dingo top 8'd a M2GO event maybe 6 or 7 days before the RC, and he was playing the 4 force negation, 4 subtlety build, right? And so I'm wondering too, like I wonder how people even got to these places, because like my statement before about more combo was in reference to like subtlety force negation version of the deck, which if you're probably looking at the one that Abe's looking at, you might be like, what in the heck is Mason talking about? This is like a grindy fair deck, right? So I guess I'm just realizing I did not fully appreciate how deep this archetype was as I'm like clicking around through all these deck lists.
I kind of love that we're getting punished for generic deck name.
Let's go.
Like we've finally done it. Modern is in a place where there's too many Esper Blink decks. To really get a sense. Like someone says that and it means 2 things at the same time. Because I was not familiar with the like subtlety force negation deck that you're talking about until I just looked at it now. And like those are 2 very, very, that's almost like that's a frog deck with Philia and Overlord to generate card advantage, in addition to like Riddler, as opposed to what I think at least what I thought of when I think of Esper Blink, of like the black white Blink deck splashing Consigned Memory and now some Quantum Riddler. So there's a lot of variation there for sure. I mean, we just need to like start looking at cereal boxes again for what we call our decks.
Yeah, we got
to answer.
Among us, let's just figure out what we're gonna call it right now. You ready? Black white Blink? Like, how should we describe this? So
Esper
these are
Sewer versus Esper Frog.
okay. I like that. So Frog is like the Force Negation deck, and Sewer is like the black white.
Yeah, I think that's just fair for what. It's
yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I am so sorry, listeners. This is a ton, and this is like I'm sure you probably had some of this. So just to make sure I understand, Spencer, you're talking about Esper Sewers when we started this conversation. Okay. Everything makes a lot more sense to me now. Because in part of it, like you were talking, I was like, I feel like these are different kinds of decks.
Okay.
And now that's why I was asking for clarification. I was like, I'm trying to get the reasoning going behind everything. And I was like, yeah, Ragavan instead of Thought. Okay, this all makes a lot of sense. I agree that Jeskai way better than Esper Sewers. I'm in on that.
Glad we got there.
Okay.
There's 3 more decks to talk about, and we're gonna kind of rapid fire them.
You're not rapid firing past Affinity. I'm letting you know that right now. I'm gonna pull stuff.
Oh no shit.
So, yeah.
Gosh. I didn't even want to talk about it.
What?
All right, let's go to the control first.
Okay.
Man, did better than I expected at the RC.
I think Abe described it perfectly when quoting Jason or CFT last week of, you do accept a beautiful game is dead, I'm going to lock you out, and that's life, baby. And I think once you embrace that mentality, blue-white control is a heck of a drug.
I don't have anything to say. Like, I think that like the deck is what it is, and if you believe that this gives you the best shot to win, good for you. Like, the matchup spread for this deck, if I go back, is slightly favorable against Amulet, slightly favorable against Esper, and then some rough matchups against Affinity, Prowess, rough matchups against Sewers and Tron. This deck is so polarized in its matchups for a deck that has a 51% win percentage. It's kind of rough for me. Like, I'm a big blue-white gamer. Like, I enjoy playing these type of decks where like I get a pivot. I really enjoy those type of turns. And this deck gets to pivot really easily, where it just locks out the game. You just get to go blah 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 blah. I would have a hard time registering this. Nobody disagrees.
Yeah.
Nobody's.
The problem is the deck I want to register we haven't talked about yet.
Okay.
That I think I'm like barreling towards sewering myself saying things on a podcast cliff. So
all right.
I think there are advantages to blue-white control, and I think, like I said at the beginning, I think Abe nailed it. Taking that quote, you're a prison deck, and if you play against matchups where your prison draw is good, you're gonna beat people, really handedly. And sometimes you do just like, oops, I played a Narset and I solitude your threat, and then I Days Undoing in your upkeep, idiot. Like the game's over. It's just like get got, nothing you could have done. And that is powerful.
Let's talk about getting got, nothing you could have done, and let's talk about Brood Scale. I'm gonna check out. I'm not gonna give my opinions on this deck. I just want you guys to talk about it.
Abe, another combo deck rolls around, and it's up to us to carry the torch. What can we say? No, I think this deck is fine-ish. I don't know how you feel, Abe. I think it presents like a pretty reasonable fair game with a combo finish, but I don't think it presents a good fair game, like a good enough one. And I don't think its combo is like powerful enough. So I don't know. It's a deck that has done well historically. I think historically it's been underappreciated, but I think maybe people have swung too far the other way.
I think that Brood Scale, if not for... I think Brood Scale is chronically underrated. I think the deck is, like, never given the respect it deserves, considering the finishes it's had, and considering, I think, the actual quality of the core of the deck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's the best way to accomplish what this deck is accomplishing, because the Affinity deck exists. and I'll explain
Yes.
that later.
They can't silence us.
But I really do think that I think it's a fine choice. I think if you like decks like these, it's a great deck to play. I think there's a ton of play to it, and it leads to, I know every time I've played against it, it leads to some pretty interesting games with some push and pull, and a lot of opportunity for my opponent to kind of go the wrong way. This is Yawgmoth in 2025. We're just about to be obsolete, but we're like, and become extinct. But it's got some play to it. I really do. I don't know why Spencer's like aghast here, as if the deck is some unplayable pile of garbage. It's not.
No, I just
How
thought
many
that was
Magic
a
Modern
really.
have you played?
I thought that was a
few
really
months?
good comparison.
Yeah.
I'm legitimately impressed by the comparison there. That was. I've never
Like,
thought
if
of
you-
it that
if
way.
you're a
That was
creature combo
really
person,
good.
and you are able to play the posturing game, and like there's a lot of times you'll catch your opponent not able to respect that you can combo, or not understanding that you can combo, from the position you're in pretty easily, or you just bully them with your creatures while they respect it too much. Like, all of those things can happen, and I think decks are playing not the right interaction to necessarily beat what it does all the time.
I think that, like, if we're reasonable deck gamers, I would talk you off of this deck. I think that what you said is true. I think there's a lot of decks that I would be like, hey, if you like this, do this, do this, do this. And, that doesn't mean... The deck plays good cards. I think that's the thing. Like, Kozilek's Command... Saga, like, it plays good cards, so like it's hard to have that bad of a deck when you play those cards. I just have always felt like this deck was like a worse version of something else. So
I think that's just kind of symptomatic of it doing a lot of things. Like, it does have a lot of tools that can play a lot of different roles, which means that it's never doing anything the best, but it's able to do a lot of them. Decks like that they're not as good as they used to be.
Yeah.
Frankly.
I'm going to talk about prowess really quick.
Wait, I want to highlight that, like, I think if you want to play a deck like this, I would implore you to try the Samwise combo deck more than this. I think that deck is a better version of this. Both have issues, though, to be clear.
I want to talk about prowess really quick. I was surprised to see prowess do well because I thought it would have a target on its back, which I do not think the deck is good at dealing with. I also was looking at the data compared to the decks that did well, how many of them did well versus stuff. And I think that this is another one where, Mason, you would say, like, mulliganing and understanding your deck and the matchup is really important in an open deckless format.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I think this deck is really strong. I think the deck is very good. I worry, though, that this deck is easily hitted out if a bunch of people bring it. So,
I guess my because we've seen it happen a bit in the past. Ironically, it was Brood Scale. What would be the thing that hates it out? You know what I mean? Like,
that's
because
fine.
the energy matchup is pretty good, right? Though we actually saw, like, when this deck was popping off,
just doesn't have a good Titan matchup, which I think is rough.
mm-hmm.
And additionally to that, like, if you're going to beat Titan on speed, or if you're going to beat Titan, I would worry that you get some cross hate of, like, things that deal with artifacts. You get cross. I just think that, like, it will get natural cross hate, and then also speed hate is my thought. I'm very big on prowess. Like, I think that a bunch of people that I know are going to bring this to Vegas. That's like their number one deck. I think that it's very good. It's very strong. It was underappreciated for, like, a lot of reasons. But I do worry that, like, if everyone comes to that conclusion, this deck can get hated out from, like, okay, well, we just need, like, to answer the first 3 turns, and then the game is over because you can't rebuild. The deck has no rebuild capabilities.
I think you're hitting on something that I think is a really true thing of Modern in the past and is becoming true again. prowess kind of loses to strategy, like loses to depth less than cards, right? Like traditional burn would lose to cards, I think, a lot. I think, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, and if I am, please correct me. But I feel like what you're saying is like Solitude Ephemerate is like a hard thing for this deck to answer. Like those two plus like spot remove, like a piece of spot removal, or something that can cover a Corey Steelcutter. And so if people are playing those kinds of decks, it is hard for the prowess deck to consistently perform because it excels at being like this fast deck that's a little bit resilient and can race other combo decks and can go a little long but can't go really long. Is that like a fair critique of like, or not, but like summation of what you're saying as well?
Yeah, I just think that like the deck did really well because people didn't respect it, and yeah, you know, it's funny, right? Because like it had like an actual 50% win percentage of the tournament, but it
did a lot of games.
Yeah, it was a ton of games, and it very much rewarded people for understanding their matchups and mulligans. I'd be really scared, for example, playing a deck that is bad against Amulet and Zoo, because I think that Zoo, despite being bad against, you know, the Blink decks, has good matchups across the board outside of that. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm up in the night.
Now,
to your point, question. Though, it also had 30% against Jeskai Blink. It also could not be that deck.
Here's my question. Why would I play the Izzet Prowess deck when I could play the Izzet Affinity deck?
Because that deck's bad.
What? Whoa! If my camera was on, you would see me being like, "Whoa! I got it." I can totally believe this is bad because like I said, I think I'm cratering toward the ditch potentially. I want to hear what the like. I'm your teammate. We're playing a team event, Spencer. And I come to you with Affinity. What's your reasoning that I'm putting it down? You know what I mean?
I think that like in the Glass Cannon format, it's really good because it's the best to like beat the other Glass Cannon decks. But I don't believe that that's the format that we're in.
Okay. So you think it's like you think it's like Neoformy space?
Sorry, not that deep. I think it's like very good against. Well, okay. I really wanted to believe in this deck. I want to preface that with this. I think that like it's hard to find a build that both gets to play a medium game and a Glass Cannon game, and its Glass Cannon draws are something that you should mulligan to with this deck, which to me leads me to believe that the deck is not good. That is my answer.
So, on win rate from the event, it is at a 3% higher win rate than is Prowess. 53% to Prowess's 50%. If you look at the matchup spread, it's incredibly similar, except Affinity is better into Esper, into E-Tron, into Goryo's, into Esperphilia decks, into E-Tron. It is worse into Brood Scale, probably doesn't have like Lightning Bolts as much. Better into Azorius Blink.
And Domain Zoo.
And into Zoo. And into Neoform because of its speed. I think that if you would recommend someone to play Prowess, which I'm not saying I would necessarily do, I think you have to consider.
I think I just said that I wouldn't, right?
Well, you just said you also know a lot of people who are registered.
I know, but like that doesn't mean that they're going to listen to me.
I just think that the Affinity deck, for all the reasons that Prowess is a deck you would want to choose, right? It has a very strong proactive game plan that is based around the first few turns of the game, which, as we've talked about, is currently a space where there's, fewer of those answers being played that are like great exchanges against it. You have access to stronger nut draws as being the Affinity deck than the Prowess deck, because the Prowess deck is always investing mana into its creatures at a 1-for-1 rate, is never going wider than the removal spells, and it, is never has cards that can like catch back up in a game. The affinity decks do have those things at the cost of it feeling close when you lose sometimes and having a bit more interaction for the board yourself. Like I think those are honestly the two biggest differences. If you consider what the decks are trying to do, like I think Affinity's positioning and Affinity as a deck is much more powerful, and it occupies very similar space. So I can't agree with anyone who thinks that Affinity is like not playable because it's too glass cannony. And
I wouldn't play either. To be clear, I'm not arguing.
I'm not. This is not for you necessarily. Spencer. This is for the listener. If you're someone who thinks, well, I'm going to play Prowess, or I think Prowess is good, but I don't understand its Affinity deck because it's too all in. Like, I think you're overestimating how all in the Affinity deck is because its absolute best draws are that all in.
Sure.
Also, I think how all in it is to have a Kappa Cannoneer in play on turn 1 or 2 is misrepresented. Like I'm all in, but I have the only hand that can win. So
it's like I have a royal flush,
I'm all in and I'm dominating you aces over kings. Okay, it's fine. Like,
I think that's the important thing to notice. Like, and I think Stoyer on the show maybe sewered me a little bit. I think he maybe whispered in my ear like it's Doctor Who, and he's like, "Isn't she looking tired?" A classic reference for Doctor Who, a Magic the Gathering property. Either way, this deck, Abe and Sensor both love that. Either way, this deck is very powerful. Like Abe saying, it can be like it shoves its chips in, but it shoves in with like aces very heavily, and it reminds me a lot of Scam, where it can play these longer games, but it also just has these really strong draws. It has elements of it that are very powerful. I linked CFT Sox deck list because this is the one that I think like there were some issues before, and I think we're a lot closer to solving those issues with this deck list. Don't pay attention to seed ship impact in the sideboard. It's like the Banksy rat, Every artist has their calling tag, and CFT Sock is a card that I can never fully understand, but I'm sure there was a reason for it, and that's this one. But, besides that card, I really like what this deck is doing, which is like I have a multitude of really strong, proactive, get on the board and take over the game draws. I put all of them in the same deck, and I have all the appealing parts of all these decks. And yeah, I have less Tamios than I would like to have, but in order to make everything work, I had to do that a little bit, And when I look at this deck, it kind of has this, it's looking like Scam once we figured out Bowmaster should be in the deck. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I can have Kappa Cannoneer and Emry and Tamiyo. Okay, how do I move forward from here? So I'm really high on this deck. This is the deck that if I was playing Vegas, I would put the most time in between now and like the second week of November. I would kind of all in on this deck unless like testing really showed that I was like off, which it might, but like I'm really high on like 73 of this 75.
Negative Titan matchup. I would just play Titan.
But every deck, but like a negative Titan matchup does not like mean you can't play a deck, right? If your answer is you want to play Titan,
I was meaning Mason.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I guess I've heard this a lot in coaching that like I can't play a deck that has a negative Titan matchup. And
don't play Modern.
Yeah, like a lot of decks have a negative Titan matchup. You should probably play Titan. I will also say this, that like I was talking to Jake Beardsley a little bit after the event, and he talked about and he ended up he played Titan in the main event. It didn't go super well, and he said I think I was playing this deck pretty well, but not great, and I was really like suffering from that. And he's like, I wish I had put more time into it. So if you're heading to Vegas, I do encourage you to put time into that. And he's like, I just ended up playing Eldrazi and doing very well in the Sunday, whatever it was called, like split the finals, and he just played Eldrazi, a deck that he has a lot of experience in. So I think Amulet's great. I'm not going to say it's not.
I do want to move on. I think we talked about all the decks we need to talk about, but I do want to say like we have a lot more time between this event and the Pro Tour for Amulet, and Mason and I and Abe, we've all told you for I don't know how many years to learn Amulet. And to say that you don't have time right now is nonsense. You do. If your goal is to qualify for the Pro Tour, you have time. So
Can I say one last thing? It's just like a two-liner. It's a TikTok.
Dude, go for it.
All right. Simic Birthing Ritual looks dangerously close to a real deck if we could just stop playing these bad cards. if we could like cut Fibblethip the Loss from our deck and just play, I don't know, more cards from Modern Horizons 2, like Subtlety and Endurance in our main deck, I think we would have a really good deck on our hands.
Dude, those cards seem really good with the number of blue-green cards on the deck. So
yeah, no, that's a combination effect. You can write that one's free on the podcast. You can put even more force and negations in your deck. I think deck looks dangerously close to a good deck.
If you want to join the conversation, don't forget to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/CCMG. Check out our sponsors at Untapped.gg, the #1 deck tracker, and mana traders with the code CCMG8. They really do help out the podcast, and we appreciate them. Always improving is the point of the show. We always want to be getting better each and every week. And this week, I really just sat down and watched to learn. I had a really interesting conversation with one of my best friends about kind of our records at different types of events and how I've never given my all when I wanted to with, kind of having kids and stuff, and like really learning from those in the late rounds of RCs that are giving their all and stuff. And this is something that I talked about a long time ago on CCMG, but so often I see people watching to correct people and be smarter than them when they're watching Magic coverage. And I just really focused this week watching the RC on like watching to learn, like why did they do this, and asking questions rather than correcting. And it was really fun. So
that's a great one. I think you should, when you're watching coverage, assume the other person is correct and try and figure out why. And if you can't understand why someone's doing something, that's a great learning moment of trying to figure out why that is so you can apply it to your game. Because all your opponents make a play or do a thing with a reason, and sometimes figuring that out can be super helpful. And watching the way Spencer's talking about, at minimum, it's just good practice for that.
Yeah. Hey, what about you?
Yeah, my always improvement this week actually comes from preparing for the Spotlight this weekend in Baltimore. I think I sent a screenshot to Mason's text like last week where I was like, there are 5 people screen sharing matches of Magic all in the standard format, all in the same Discord call. I think that means that I am the responsible for the biggest testing effort for this event in the world right now. I've got the only group of people on it. It's like right before the RC. But this week, I've spent the time focusing on, spent a lot of time focusing on ideas and focusing on kind of the broader sense of the format, but now narrowing in on kind of what we've learned and what we're trying to accomplish with our build of, spoiler alert, I'm going to play the VV Cauldron deck. Just putting that out there. But focusing in on, and then also like updating our priors of like, okay, so something I often miss will be like, I'll do all this testing and be like, okay, I want to play these cards, but focusing in on like what the metagame's actually going to look like, and then making sure that the choices all line up, right? I maybe have learned what my, 11th to 15th sideboard card, how they should be tuned for what things I'm kind of trying to make sure I have plans for. But, I kind of had a conversation today even of like, is this decision making us better in the control matchup that we're maybe afraid of because we think people will play it and it can be hard sometimes? Or is that like, could this card just be helping us in the mirror match and against the red matchup where we think it's going to be, 40+% of the room on those things? Which of those is better to do? And just like making sure to keep that like in the forefront and working through ideas and making sure that the theory is sound to what it is we're trying to do, to not have to test every one of these cards that we've played with at certain points in there. But really like, make sure that the whole 75 lines up with what we're expecting the room to be, compared to just kind of at one point I was like, I've been playing the same 75 for like 2 weeks and I'm super comfortable, but that doesn't mean it's what I actually want to play. And making sure to understand where the wiggle room is and leveraging that as opposed to just getting complacent or kind of correcting for what I've seen.
I'm proud of you. You just literally had a conversation with me that you weren't good at this, and that you were you admired me for being good at this exact thing, and then you just did it. You just decided that you were going to do it. I don't know. Like, that's really cool, man. Like, you should be proud of yourself. Like, you just said you were bad at this thing to me personally. This was off the air, but when we did our like Fearless Inventory after the show, it was like, hey, I think it's really cool that you're really good at just like dialing on a deck and doing that. I wish I was better at that. And you just said that you did it.
Yeah, it's taken a lot of attentive focus. It sucks. It's so much work.
That do be sucking. Yeah, but it's good to put the work in, and it's like a super important part of the process, right? Like you have to do what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm very excited to celebrate with all of the Magic Online Vintage Supreme Cube drafts I can stomach as soon as the tournament's over.
Apparently, Arena. I don't know if you guys saw my tweet. Mason, what about you?
Yeah, mine comes from getting an opportunity to go and play an RCQ this past weekend. So basically, with my mom's health and some other stuff going on, it didn't make a lot of sense to like really try and get to the RC. Like, basically, she had 4 tumors in her. She's been doing chemo for the last year. She had a big surgery, which is why I was out for part of November last year. I had to like take care of her full time for like a month. That was like 2.5 weeks, but either way. And now, about a year later, she's almost fully over it. 3 of the 4 are gone. The last one is severely shrunk. And the doctor is thinking probably January 2026, she's going to be done doing treatment. That's kind of like the expected outcome, which is great. It's a great place to be. And originally I had plans for this weekend that kind of fell through. And I was just like, wait, I can go and play an RCQ. And it kind of just occurred to me like on a Friday night, after I got done doing the CubeCon commentary. Holy cow, that was a tongue twister with Sutcliffe, which was fun, even if the game wasn't particularly great if you saw. And I was like, oh, I should just do this. And I should like think a little bit and think about how I want my deck and like actually play. And like, I'm going to go in there with measured expectations. I don't have VV Cauldron, but I have these cards and I can switch them up a little bit, blah, blah, blah. And then I just went in there with the intention of like, I want to win, and recently I've been playing and it's been like, I want to compete and I want to do my best to kind of try that fire. But like, I was like, oh, I can actually play this and I can go actually play the RC. And this seems like a reasonable thing that can actually occur. And conquered, won my RCQ playing medium blue-white control. I must be awful because when I play against the VV deck, I'm terrified. Abe, when you're talking about that matchup, can be hard. I played it in the finals and I was like, oh no, the whole time. But I ended up pulling it out, and it was just great to like get to kind of compete and know that like I'm not just playing for money or for like whatever. It's like I'm taking a step to getting back on the pro tour because this like a reasonable thing that can actually occur right now. I know that I don't need to like be in town, so that was nice, and it was cool to have that spark come back, and especially on the back of also watching Steve Stillman made a video for his pro tour. He had his first pro tour. And Steve's a very nice guy. You can find him on YouTube, Steve Stillman, just that name. But he made a video recounting his first experience that was very, very funny, very quick paced, and very much like, dang, I miss it, Yeah. And so I am going to go to not Portland, but Milwaukee or Minnesota at some M place in Milwaukee. February. All right, I'll be at Milwaukee. That's the game plan right now. So it was fun. It was awesome. And I'm excited to get back in the streets.
You can join the conversation by joining the public Discord or the public Discord. Links are in the show notes. The Patreon Discord is for patrons of $5 or more per month. You can also leave a YouTube comment. We really appreciate them. They're Abe's favorite thing in the world. If you want to make Abe smile, which Abe has a great smile. Smile, Abe. Yeah, there's the real one. You can do that by going to patreon.com/ccmdg or just leave a YouTube comment. You can also check us out on Twitter at ccmdg. It should be ccmdg or ccmdg pod everywhere. Like, sub, comment, and review. Where can people find you, Mason?
If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Mason E. Clark. Find me at twitch.tv/the Mason Clark. Reach out to me for coaching via my DMs on Twitter. Once again, it's Mason E. Clark, or my email, masoneclark@gmail.com. I'll put coaching in the description. I do have some openings as we have some clients qualify for the Pro Tour. That's Pog. They're starting testing for Lorwyn, but got some weeks off before we really hit the ground running on that. Abe, what about you?
You can find me over at Blue Sky at More Nothings, or you can find me on Twitter at More Nothings. If you're looking for coaching, you can DM me there, or you can send an email over at morenothings@gmail.com.
You can find me at Spencer13H or at He's a Game, basically everywhere. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. It was very fun, and we'll see you all next week with a brand new episode of Constructed Criticism.